I talked a little bit about how we can use perennials to cover land and improve farm profit while protecting our natural resources.
How does that happen? How can you do that?
Well, you can plant perennials and they hold the soil.
Such as?
So, perennials are plants that live more than 1 year. Some of the perennials that I talked about today are ones that I think have market pull. So, sustained market pull is important in this farm economy right now. Our grain crops are struggling with it a little bit, but there is growing demand for biomass feedstocks that can replace fossil fuels and, in some cases, woody feedstocks. So, what do I mean by that?
Yes.
So think about any food takeout you've gotten lately. You might notice that it increasingly comes in paper type packages, less styrofoam. People don't want styrofoam anymore. So, did you ever think about where that packaging comes from? Well, you might think it comes from wood fiber, but in the US, we don't actually have that much wood fiber anymore. And so, a lot of that packaging material, especially if it's sustainable, is actually coming from sugarcane bagasse in Asia. 90% of that packaging is coming from Asia. So you might not think it, but in places like Illinois, in particular around universities that have a lot of innovation, there are companies who are trying to find small places to grow biomass to make some of these now in demand products. Feed additives are another example. So organic cellulose-based prebiotics are things that you can make from biomass crops. So how does that fit in the Farm Assets Conference? Well, our analyses have shown for many years now that there are always pockets of fields that don't provide financial return. About 5% of farmland typically loses money year over year, but it's hidden in sort of small fields. And those parts of the fields often are environmentally sensitive too. So maybe they have drainage problems, or maybe they're sandy and have runoff or other drainage problems. What we've found is that if you can put the perennial crops on those parts of the fields or those fields, they do really well because perennials are naturally resilient with their deep roots and long-lived lifestyles. And then you can sell it for these new emerging markets. So that's what we were talking about today, emerging markets that help cover your farmland assets.
Okay. Now, some of the folks who are listening or watching are going to say, what kind of a crop is she talking about?
Yeah.
Are we talking about growing more corn that has more stalk than an ear, or what are we talking
That's
about?
a great question, Stu. So we have made a lot of stuff out of corn stalks over the years, right? But corn has what we call a rather high carbon intensity, and because it's an annual crop, it takes just more greenhouse gases to make it, more fertilizer, for example. So the market is really looking for low carbon intensity feedstocks for these products.
Okay.
So what I'm talking about are perennial grasses like switchgrass or miscanthus in particular, or incorporation of tree species back into our crop landscapes that can be used for some of these feedstocks too. So agroforestry is believe it or not, a growing part of Illinois agriculture.
Growing trees takes a long time.
It does.
The grasses would take a couple of years to get started.
Mhm. So there are multiple ways that we can help think about financing that establishment period. That is emerging and depends on market pull, right? If there's no one that wants to buy the product, why would you finance a way to establish the crop? But as this market pull is developing, we're seeing ag lenders get more interested in financing options for perennial crops. We also see, for example, municipalities. The city of Decatur is currently has a project where they're giving an extra $250 an acre for farmers establishing switchgrass in the Lake Decatur watershed to help them get through that establishment period before the crop is sold. I think the take-homes that we heard from the precision crop management team really resonate with me today. So the idea that we need to differentiate our Illinois crop economy, lower costs, and maybe grow the operation in new directions. Those are three take-homes that have stood out to me today.
Okay, so Illinois may change away from corn and beans and start
I don't
growing some other stuff out in
I
the
don't know that
fields.
we'll ever change away from corn and beans, but I think we might get back to the amount of corn and beans that we used to have. So 50 years ago, we had 20% of our land area in small grains and perennials. That was before we had water quality problems. I think those two things are related, and we had a stronger farm economy by some metrics. So I think getting back to a level of diversification that we know works for us in Illinois is what I see coming.